Hi everybody, I'm Bianca Rodriguez and this is You Are Complete, the intersection between spirituality, purpose, and creativity. I am here with my beautiful friend, Christina McDowell, who wrote a very powerful memoir called After Perfect, A Daughter's Memoir. And we are here to talk about her journey creating this incredible memoir. I mean, usually people so young haven't written a memoir yet, but you've been through a lot. You've been through a lot. All right, so tell us, how did you become a writer?
Okay, well, people do say, they look at me and they're like, what do you have to say?
Hey.
So about 8 years ago, when all of these crazy things started happening in my life, so I guess I should back up and say I grew up, just outside of Washington, D.C., next to the CIA, around a lot of, political wealth and affluence and privilege, and had this very fairy tale childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I think I opened the book, there's a scene where my father is flying his airplane over the rooftop of our house. This is before 9/11 happened. And he was waving to us in his aviator sunglasses, and it was,
that's the cover of the book. That inspired the cover.
And it was magical, and he was my superhero. And then many years later, when I was 18, the FBI arrested him for securities fraud. He was, like a Wall Street guy, penny stocks. He did business with the Wolf of Wall Street, that movie that Martin Scorsese directed, and so when I was 18, he went to prison. He entered into a plea agreement, and then shortly thereafter, I discovered he had taken my identity. He left me in over $100,000 worth of credit card debt, and never told me. So the betrayal that I felt, and the disillusionment of my childhood, and my story is really about the unraveling of that. The truth, getting to the truth of, my childhood, my relationship with my father, my mother. I'm in the middle of 3 girls. I have 2 sisters. So writing became, at that time, a way for me to process everything. I was so desperate for an outlet and a way to express myself. I wasn't in therapy at the time. I felt very isolated and alone, and a lot of shame about having a father that was in prison. That's a huge part of the journey of grappling that and being exposed to that world. And then over time, I had over 200 pages of letters that I'd saved from prison, and emails and stories that I just had to write down and tell, because, well, there was just so much craziness happening in my life.
Yeah, it's like you needed to get it out.
Yeah, and then my girlfriend...
That was your vessel.
Yeah. And a friend of mine looked at it, and she said, I think this is a memoir. I think you should and can write a book. And I said, no way. I'm not a writer. I'm not smart enough. I thought all these things, there's just no way I can do it. And
what persuaded you to do it?
And I think I had this real need to tell this story. And I think because I did feel so alone, and I think oftentimes writers do feel that way, and a lot of times writing comes from a place of pain. And I wanted to connect with other people. So when The Wolf of Wall Street, right before that film came out, and I read, because I didn't know who the film was about. I didn't know that man had done business with my father. And so when I read about it, and when I did find out, I was angry, because I felt they were glorifying greed, and they didn't give a voice to the victims or the children of those, who were causing harm. They're also victims. And so I wrote an open letter to Martin Scorsese. It was published in the LA Weekly, and I expressed my rage. And I received thousands of letters of support from young women, young men, people who not necessarily were victims of fraud, but they were betrayed by their parents. They experienced such loss. I Bernie Madoff victims reach out to me. It was incredible.
Wow.
It was overwhelming. And so I felt I'm not alone. That's all I ever really wanted, was to be able to connect and share the story, and hope that there's another young woman that might connect with it.
So that gave you sort of like the motivation to be like, I am going to write this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is worthy. This is important. I need to give this a voice because it's going to help other people.
Yes.
So it's like your own healing, but you're also going to help heal other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I felt too, like, because I wanted the message, I feel so strongly that there's such a lack of accountability around that world of finance, that I wanted to tell a story that was about accountability and that was about forgiveness too. How do you forgive someone who's betrayed you on such a deep level?
How do you? Tell me. Tell us how.
It's a process. It's a long process, and for a long, long time, I blamed my father for the mistakes that I continued to make into my mid to late 20s.
Those are outlined very well in the book.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that.
I get into some trouble.
You do.
And so I ended up getting sober. I stopped being self-destructive and using drugs and alcohol as a way to numb the pain that I was experiencing. And I wanted to find a way where I could be of service, where I could try to reach out to other children who may have a parent in prison. Because I felt, having gone to prison and having visited my father in prison, it was such a traumatic moment to be exposed to such a dark part of America.
And your own father.
And my father. Yeah, and seeing him in that light, and I thought, oh, there have to be, and there are millions of children who have experienced this. So I wanted to find a way to be of service to them. So I met a woman who works with families of the incarcerated, and I shared my story with her, and she said, okay, you're coming with me to prison, and you're going to speak, and you're going to share your story. And I thought, I thought she was insane. I was like, there's no way.
I want to work with the kids, not the inmates. What the heck?
I trusted her. And so I traveled with her to prison, and I participated in what's called a victim's workshop, which is a form of restorative justice. And how it worked was I stood up in front of, 100 fathers who are incarcerated, and I spoke on behalf of young women who have a father in prison, and I gave an impact statement, and I shared with them how my father's incarceration affected my life and my relationship with him, and it created sort of a dialogue, and which opened up my heart just a little bit to understand a father's journey and what led them to commit a crime. And it helped me again, like, process and open my heart a little bit to understanding that, okay, this happened and I have to accept it, and that you can find a way to forgive without being in contact with the person who harmed you if they are unwilling to be accountable, which my father was unwilling to be accountable.
Did you try that process with him, to contact him and create?
Well, I didn't, only because he had contacted me in such a way that was harmful to me. So if I were to reach out, I would only be re-victimizing myself. So this allows sort of like a surrogate father for me to have a dialogue with. And one father wrote me a letter, and he said, I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I'd like to apologize on behalf of your father. I'm so sorry. I want to say sorry to you.
I have goosebumps everywhere.
It was so powerful, and it was so beautiful.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. So by you, agreeing to get sober, which I know is such a difficult, you have to be so brave to take away the thing that you've been using to help you cope, and often, right, it helps people cope until, if you have a problem with it, it does more destruction. And then one of the principles of 12-step programs is to be of service. And so you avail yourself to being of service, and through that you heal. Yeah. That's just so beautiful.
And you help heal I could help heal, some of the fathers whose daughters won't speak to them for their own reasons. And so we could have a relationship where we could heal a part of each other in a way that was so absent in the real world. So it's a very powerful, delicate process.
Yes.
Because not all victims want to have that experience or confrontation, or they may not be ready yet. I was definitely at a place in my life where I felt ready. I wouldn't have been ready years before that. Yeah.
And how has your life changed since you've forgiven?
Oh my, your whole world opens up, because I think that you can really experience joy, and you let go of these resentments that are weighing you down, and I feel free today. Like, you feel...
Yeah, one of my favorite things is like forgiveness is something that we do for ourselves, and there's so much, you're talking about the fact that you didn't even have contact with your dad over this process. Like, this process was really about you forgiving him for yourself, and you managed to do it with like all these other guys that needed the help.
Yeah, it is a gift we give ourselves, because we get to move forward and build. I get to build a life for myself. That's all mine. That's not based on any other circumstance or tragedy or... Yeah, it's the greatest gift.
All right, so you've written this book, you've experienced this process of forgiveness, and now it's out. So the book is out in the world. I read it. It's a memoir. It's so personal. How is that?
Very scary. I've explained it like... I think writing a memoir, it sort of feels like you're walking around the world naked and crying.
Totally.
And
wow, what a visual.
It's you feel so vulnerable. You do feel very, very fragile, I think, because everyone sort of has the impulse to want to care what other people think, but really, it's none of my business what anybody else is going to think. But it is something that is so, so personal to me that it was very hard not to read what people's thoughts were, or their perceptions, or their review. Things like that, because it's my life, and they're my feelings, and it was my journey and my experience, and everybody's going to feel differently, and but you feel very, very vulnerable. But I think what made everything worth it was hearing from the young women who inspire me to keep sharing and speaking my truth. Because the letters I've received from the young girls who've gone through exactly what I've gone through in one way or another, that I did my job. If they could relate, or if it helped them in some way, find a way to forgive their own father or their mother, or
it's like
change their life around.
Like you've got, the more of a risk you take, it's like the more that there's going to be a reward. And it's like you really put yourself out there, and the way it's impacted people, and the segment of kids, I'm sure adults too, that have been through similar experiences. Is unbelievable. So it so makes up, I guess, for the feeling of feeling vulnerable and in front of people and uncomfortable. It's like you can put your head on the pillow at night and just be like, no, it was worth it.
Especially since I had always wanted to share this story out of a feeling of loneliness and isolation. And so here I am now, putting myself out into the world and saying, okay, this happened, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it anymore. And this is part of who I am. And, experiencing that human connection between other people who get it. There's nothing in the world that beats that.
There's nothing like the connection between two people. I always say, like, a spiritual experience happens in the connection, between two people.
Absolutely.
And I'm lucky that I know you pretty well. So will you talk a little bit about your connection to spirituality? Yeah,
I think this is the other thing. I can say I'm scared all I want when, the memoir is out in the world, but what helped keep me grounded while I wrote it was also removing my ego. So to say that meditation really, really helped the writing process. The idea that I'm just the vessel for whatever my higher power thing that's bigger than me, wants to share with the world is just gonna, I'm just gonna channel that. It helps a lot. It also frees you from writer's block, actually. It really helped me just say, okay, we're gonna lose the perfectionism. Yeah. We're gonna just let go and surrender to, and it's not gonna be perfect, and we can go back and revise. But meditation and spirituality was a huge part of this process for me. A lot of surrender.
Yeah, I love that. Just right. If we look at ourselves as just the vessel, it just makes it so much easier. It's just so much more clear. It's just like, I'm here to allow whatever this thing that's greater than us to just shine through me. And the best thing you can do is get out of your own way.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Do writers ever talk about this stuff, or is this a weird conversation for writers?
No, I think writers do. There's a TED talk that Elizabeth Gilbert gave when Eat, Pray, Love came out, because it was so huge. Yeah. She was so overwhelmed. She thought, I could never write another book because this was so huge and I feel so much pressure. But that's ego. You have to, once you let that go, and it's about the journey. It's not about the result. You sit down and you have to love being inside of the work and inside of the writing, and however that transpires into the world, whoever you touch or what happens is we aren't really in control of that. So
do you think most writers feel like their job is to be a vessel to express their truth and allow whatever this greater thing is to work through them, in order to connect, in order to give another person just that feeling of I'm not alone in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe not all writers, but I don't know if Hemingway felt that way, or drank and or he didn't he die of alcoholism, I think. I do think most writers, because it's so personal, it's so hard, and it is vulnerable. Even if it's fiction, it's your voice. These words are coming out of you. So I think to be able to keep going, to have the courage to you've got to let go, and just on a more just practical level, it's a muscle. So it's the first thing you write isn't going to be perfect. It's probably going to suck. It certainly did for me. I look at really, really old drafts, and the more I do it, the better I get. Training for a marathon. You get better as you go. And I try to write every day, even if it's just journaling.
I've heard many of the creative people that I talk to say that you don't have to be inspired to start doing painting or writing or whatever it is. It's through the sitting down and the just being like, I'm doing this today, that then the inspiration comes.
Yeah, you totally. Yeah. You can't. I was under a lot of pressure with deadlines, and I didn't have the time to wait for the revelation or the inspiration or the moment. So I had to there were good days and bad days, like any job,
Yeah.
Good days and bad days.
You still show up even if you don't feel like showing up.
Exactly.
And then oftentimes I find those are the days where crazy miracles happen, or things that I don't expect happens, and I'm like, wow, well, I'm glad I showed up today. This actually worked.
Right. I always tell people, I say writing is like magic also, because you don't know necessarily you can't see the future, right? So you're writing this thing, and then you have 250 pages, and then suddenly there's a story there, and it's a puzzle, and things, you're starting to sort of match things and see another storyline. It's like magic. These things that you didn't see before, you see suddenly the whole picture. And then from there you build, and you keep writing, or you change something, and it is magical in a way.
Yeah. No, I love how the creative process, it literally unfolds. And I think, like you were saying, the more you have your ego or your own agenda about how it's supposed to look, you limit the opportunity for things that you couldn't even think of. Things are wow, this is an incredible idea. I would have never thought that.
To remain open. Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a connection with spirituality before you wrote the book?
I did. I'd started to experience definitely signs from the universe that were just an indication that I was on the right path, that I should continue to tell my story.
Like what?
I hope this story doesn't sound too out there.
Okay.
But
I like out there. That's what we do here. We're all about out there, right? Yeah.
But I remember I wanted to be an actress, and I talk about that in the book. And it was very much intertwined with my relationship with my father, and needing love and attention and validation and all these things that I couldn't give myself. Mm-hmm. And part of my journey was being able to provide those things for myself, doing and finding out what I really, really love to do creatively. So I was feeling very, very lost, and it was early on in my sobriety, and I was on the phone with my mother, and I was annoyed with her, and I said, I don't know what to do with my life, but I think I want to write. And she was saying, you should do this and you should do that, being mom. And I hung up and felt really sad and frustrated and angry. And so I was driving in rush hour in LA, not far from here, and I was thinking about my grandmother, who was a writer for the Long Beach newspaper. She was a columnist, and she passed away when I was in high school. So I never really got to know her as a writer. She was always grandma, and I had really regretted not getting to know her more. And so I called her Mimi. That was her name. And I was so angry, I pulled the car over. There was a little girl selling lemonade, and I just was like wishing that I could talk to my grandmother, Mimi. And I said, I'm just going to go chill out and buy a little cup of lemonade and say hi to this girl and like take a walk. Yeah. I need to chill out. So I go up to this girl and I said, how much is the lemonade? And she said, it's 25 cents. And it actually wasn't lemonade. She was selling little pieces of watermelon. And I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll eat some whatever you're selling. It's fine. I'll take it. Yeah. Just need a break. And I looked at her and I said, what's your name? And she said, Mimi.
No. Another goosebump.
I know. I just thought,
synchronicities.
Okay, I think being a writer is something I'm onto, because I really felt I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to be a writer, and I was too scared, and I needed a sign from the universe, and I took that as a pretty clear sign.
That's that
I could do it.
Really clear sign.
And then it was about, 10 months later that I wrote an article. It went viral, and as a result, I was able to sell my story and write the book. So, yeah, it was.
That is quite a sign.
Yeah.
How do you interpret those signs?
I really take it as, okay, I'm gonna take that next action of going in that direction and see what happens, and just putting one foot in front of the other. And if the doors open, then they open, and if they close, then I'll have to go in another direction. But it was pretty consistent, the doors that kept opening in this way as a writer. It was, okay, I think I'm on the right path now. Wow. I don't think I was. I think I was a little off for a few years that I share about in the book. Yeah.
I always feel like synchronicities like that to me are like winks from the universe. That's like, you're headed in the right direction. Yeah. Like, keep going. Keep going.
You're good. You're good. You're okay.
You're okay. You're fine.
Totally.
What are you working on now?
I am working on a novel that takes place in Washington, D.C. I very much want to explore a story that involves a victim and an offender, and really show in depth what restorative justice can do, and as far as forgiveness. And
I love that term, restorative justice. Is this something you came up with, or is this something that's happening in the world?
No, this is something that's happening now, and it's not it's not talked about a lot in the media because I think the way we think about crime and justice is very black and white.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have bad people, evil people, and good people who are victims. And
Mm-hmm.
I personally have a different belief that it's not so black and white. I think that what I discovered along my journey was that a lot of the people who have committed crimes, some of them have committed crimes at a very young age, who grew up in severe poverty, who
Mm-hmm.
did not have the tools or the resources to, you know, to develop a real kind of moral compass. A lot of it has to do with addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, and as I heard a lot of these stories, and when I traveled to prison, and I've traveled a few times now to speak, I became fascinated by their humanity, because what we see on the news is very kind of fear sort of instilling and driven images that I think are meant to scare people, and there's, I'm sure there are some political reasons for that, you know, tough on crime and who's going to be elected and who's going to, you know,
and creating fear
in our culture, and
makes people easier to persuade to do certain things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what I discovered, what I found so fascinating, was the humanity that exists inside the darkest places. And I really want to tell a story that opens our thinking a little bit more as far as how we view crime, and also that and how we view our victims as well, giving a victim the voice, because I think also in the media I've noticed too is that we sort of, the victim will remain the victim, but the star is really the perpetrator.
Wow.
That people, I think, tend to want to focus on.
Wow, God, you're so right. Yeah, it's really about like the negative aspect of the situation versus the positive, which is like people are healing, and it sounds like actually the perpetrator can also heal too, because a lot of the time they need to be healed.
Yeah.
In my experience, you know, working in the field as a therapist for so many years, is that usually people behave out of a wound.
Oh my God. Most people I've found that I've spoken to in prison have been victimized. They have been the victim of a crime before they committed the crime.
The victim becomes the victimizer.
It's a
like
cycle.
It's just exactly, it's a cycle. So you go in there and you share. Is it basically that you share the story of what it was like to be on the other side of their actions, and that perhaps helps them start to gain maybe some kind of like a moral compass that's maybe missing, so that they can start to heal and amend their own behavior going forward, knowing that like, oh my God, when I do this, look at all the wreckage that I leave.
Absolutely. And there's some very powerful true stories out there where you know, the mother became the mother of the woman who lost her son to gang violence. She became like the mother of the young boy who killed her son. She was able to then heal from the loss of her son by developing a relationship with him. I mean, that is sort of the epitome of restorative justice, because how do you grapple with that, losing a child, and to bear that hate, you know, the hatred of another human for the rest of your life? I mean, I'm not one to judge or to say how anyone should grieve, you know, the loss of a child, but I read that story and just thought, my God, that takes courage. And she probably lives a very free life now because she's learning how to forgive on a daily basis.
I can't even quantify or put into words like the capacity for human beings to heal, because I think, I mean, losing a child is like, goes against, you know, everything evolutionary. Like, you know, you're supposed to, you know, they're supposed to outlive you. And then, oh my God, for her to become a caring, loving, nurturing, like mother figure to this kid that did that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories that we don't hear about all the time in the news about repair. You know, about restoring justice. Because
and I love that. I just thought because it also what's happened to you know, the people that we call the perpetrators, what happened to them is also unjust usually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yes, there's those few cases where...
Yeah, well don't get me wrong, there's some psychopaths who need to be
there's a few
not
personality disorders that I think, I don't know
Absolutely.
exactly how they develop, but sometimes it does seem like their upbringing was not so terrible. But I think the majority is people, like you said, they're suffering from mental illness and they're suffering from addiction, untreated, and that's their best coping is to do these incredibly destructive behaviors. And what I have found is whenever we do anything destructive to ourselves, it always leaves wreckage. Or if you start by acting out on other people, it always will destroy you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Wow, so the justice is like happening on both ends.
Oh, yeah.
That's
absolutely.
I'm so happy to know that this is happening in the world.
Oh, yes, it is. And I'm such a huge advocate for it. And I'm also, so I'm working on that book, and then I'm also volunteering with a new organization called POPS. Which stands for Pain of the Prison System, and it's particularly geared towards students in school who have been impacted by prison, whether they have a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister or a friend. And it started at Venice High School in Los Angeles. And the hope is, and they're hopefully the research will come out soon, that it's prevention. It's to prevent kids from dropping out of school. It's to provide a network of support, much like recovery. It works like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, or it's all anonymous, and these kids get together and they can share their pain or their struggle with losing a parent to the system, and it's just to keep them not feeling isolated and alone.
And I was going to piggyback on what you were saying earlier about that, is that, you know, there's so much shame, I think, associated with having a parent who's in the prison system. And like you were saying, when you first started writing, that was like the safest space for you to start expressing what was going on, because it's just you and the paper or the laptop, and then it's like,
of course,
it's the contrary action of the actually opening it up and sharing it with other people that allowed the healing to occur. But it sounds like a really safe space, and that it sounds like it's anonymous. And
absolutely, it's I think the real silent victims of crime are the children of those who have committed the crime, because they've done nothing wrong, but they will, we're so afraid, and I can speak as a daughter of someone who was incarcerated when I was 18, we're so afraid that we will be judged based off of an action that had nothing to do with who we are, and so the level of ostracism that I saw my sister go through, or that I went through in a certain way, is a child should never have to go through that. And so this provides a safe space for them to talk about it.
Yeah, there's no preparation for that. No kid should have to
I think
experience that. And what's so wild is kids are developing their identity, and just to have that going on with a family, kids are so attached to their family, and it's in high school that high school in the 20s that you start this differentiation process, and it's like, wow, that shame becomes so internalized, as if that is a reflection of you, and then to suffer in silence is like, it's like victims of any kind of abuse, where people also don't tell, sexual abuse, physical abuse, gross neglect.
Yes. It's the same feeling. It's all those same feelings.
Because I heard you describe it as trauma, and I think that's the right word to use to describe it, because it really is, because it's anytime you feel like you're going to be physically harmed or emotionally harmed, and I think that it falls into to that category.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's an incredible organization that Amy Friedman, who's one of the founders of, who's also an author, wants to take it nationally. She wants it to be in every public school in America. And I mean, I think the numbers are astounding, how many children have been impacted by our justice system.
And the
Millions.
number of people that are incarcerated is astounding. So to think that, even half those people have families. Yeah. I don't know what the statistics are on that, but damn, there's a lot of kids. Yeah.
And it's giving them a voice. And it's not to say that whatever the child chooses, whether they want to be in contact with their parent, or sometimes, like in my situation, I don't want to have contact with that parent. So they have they should have the right to be able to say, I don't want to be in contact with my parent. And we should honor that, however, their process.
Yeah. So empowering. And to give it a voice and to let these kids know that they're not alone, because I imagine that if there's so much shame associated with it, it's not like at the lunch table you're going to be like, oh yeah, well my dad's a prison, and another kid's like, me too. Right. It's like nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I learned my lesson a few times. I mean, I was at one point, I think later on in my journey, I went from saying nothing, being completely shut down, to oversharing, which can be harmful too, because you don't really know
who you're sharing it with.
And you have to figure out what the appropriate boundaries are, and when is it okay to share and not okay. So this provides a safe place where like you can share, say whatever you need to say,
and then also all the like struggles that go along with it, like what you're just saying, like who do I share with, who don't I share with? They can all talk about that and decide for themselves.
What's
a support group.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is
much like a grief recovery group, or you know, it works like that.
I'm a big fan of group process. Group process is so healing, because I think the greatest thing is for us to realize that we are not alone. You know, and so when you have other people sharing the same thing and also being vulnerable, right? It gives us, which is crazy, because it's like your book is like this massive, you know, step in the direction of like, you're not alone. Like this happens to a lot of people. And I'm just so proud of you. I'm so proud of you for writing this book. It's such an honor to be your friend.
Oh, you too.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're ready for our 3 questions.
Okay.
I've been reworking these questions, but I think I got them down. All right. I'm open to suggestions, you guys. You can write them in the bottom of the feed. Okay, so my first question is, what is your favorite book?
Oh my God. I have so many. I have my favorite children's book. I should say, I'll keep it in the context of writing this book. There were a few books that made me feel like I was not so alone, which was, I would say, the first one I read was Alice Sebold's Lucky, her memoir. She also wrote The Lovely Bones. She'd survived.
Yes.
Lucky is her memoir.
I haven't read Lucky.
It was the memoir she wrote
Bones
before.
So
I know.
Powerful and beautifully written and like haunting and like visual and like, I mean, I do not usually remember books, and like I like have a whole vision of that book.
So she wrote a memoir before that called Lucky about her. She survived a violent rape when she was 19 years old in college, and it's her journey through that. And I was so blown away by her willingness to share all of these things that, as a woman, I just felt, well, okay, she could do it, I can do it, And then Nick Flynn, who wrote Another Bullshit Night in Sex City, he's also a poet, was his memoir about his father who was in and out of jails. He was homeless, abandoned him and his mom when he was very young. His mother committed suicide.
Oh my goodness.
And then later, he was working, I think it takes place in Boston. He was working at a homeless shelter, and his father shows up at the homeless shelter he's working at, and so it's about his journey reconnecting with his dad. I mean, it's so. And then I thought, you know, a kid who knows what it's like to have a father that's been in and out of prison and jail, and so that was the first time I felt, okay, I'm not alone. You know, Nick Flynn has his story, and then, of course, I love Joan Didion so much. The Year of Magical Thinking, all of her essays from the 70s. I'm a big fan of hers too.
3, that's
really I know,
good.
I'm sorry, I gave you
No,
too much.
that's great. You're a writer, you know. Okay, my second question is, what is one word that you would use to describe yourself?
One word to describe myself? Oh my God, the pressure. Compassionate.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I do. Yeah. That so touches you. I can
like,
teary.
Think about my journey and think compassionate.
Yes, I love that. Okay, our last question is, what's one thing you wish you could have told your younger self, either as a child or teen?
Oh, that you are enough, that you're safe, that you're okay. You're enough. Yeah. So don't worry about what other people think of you.
Yeah.
You worry too much about what other people think. It sounds so easy and simple, but it's kind of hard sometimes to
It's
not
really hard.
worry what other people think of you.
Especially after putting out
Yeah.
a book and people can access you very personally in paperback, in hardcover. Is it Kindle ready?
Yes. And I did the voice. If you want to listen to me for
Audiobook?
9 hours and something minutes, I did the audiobook.
You did? Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Which I sort of regretted halfway through. I was like, I do not like the sound of my voice, but okay, we're in it. We're committed.
I worry I'm going to get like that after like a few seasons of this. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If folks want to get in touch with you and know more, connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
They can, they can email me.
Sure.
Should I give I have an email address, although I should have them. I'm like, now that I'm thinking about it, I need to set up an email on my website.
Yeah.
If they want to read more about me, ChristinaMcDowell.com is my website. And then my email is Christina.McDowell1016@yahoo.com.
Perfect.
Yes.
And if you have enjoyed this and the messages that I try to bring of inspiration, please feel free to find me on Instagram at YouAreComplete, on Twitter at YouAreComplete, at my website, youarecomplete.com. And I thank you guys all for tuning in. And please remember that you are complete, you are whole, and you are miraculous. Have a beautiful day, and thank you to my friend.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you.
Yay!